Welcome to African Horizon. Today I want to share some perspectives and thoughts on what I think about the Western world's news coverage of Africa. I think that a lot of newspapers and news channels and media houses across Europe and North America could increase and sharpen and really widen their news coverage of a range of developments across Africa. Unfortunately, a lot of newspapers and news channels seem to focus mostly on, wars and conflicts and famine and refugee crisis. Well, there are many other things going on across Africa. Africa is a wide-ranging continent with 54 countries, over 1.1 billion people. The UN's forecast for African population growth is that by 2100, the world is going to have approximately 11 billion people, and over 4 billion people are forecasted to live in Africa. That means over 40% of the world's population is going to live in Africa. And that means we really need to increase our understanding, our knowledge, and our insights about the various developments in Africa. And newspapers and news channels and media houses play a very important role in that matter to provide credible, nuanced, and balanced journalism of a range of fields that can provide people living in Europe and North America with an understanding for what is really going on. That, I think, is an important role which newspapers and news channels and media houses should increasingly focus on. Now, there are some news channels and newspapers in Europe and in North America that are increasing their focus on Africa. That is very positive. However, I think there's just such a big opportunity and potential that still can be looked at. So, for example, in terms of business development, in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of finance, in terms of potentially looking at various fintech and various entrepreneurial sectors and areas, there is a huge market to look at. There's many developments across many countries in Africa. That, I think, is something which would be very interesting for newspapers and news channels and media houses to look at, because that could also inspire entrepreneurs, business peoples, and companies across Europe and North America to also focus their investments and really long-term strategic planning towards Africa in a much larger way than what we are seeing. Now, there are many companies from Europe and North America that are also considering and looking at Africa, but I think there could be so many more. And we really need to think about how we can increase investments across Africa, because that is also very important for the businesses that invest in Africa. There are many opportunities. The growth potential is very, very strong. And with a long-term strategic footing in Africa, one can also increase and widen investments. So in terms of finance, economy, and business development, there are many areas that I think newspapers and news channels and media houses should cover. In addition, one can look at arts and architecture, design, and fashion. I mean, there is so much going on across many countries in Africa. There are wide-ranging, rich, and varied cultures with a background in arts. There are art galleries opening across Africa. There are, designers. There are architects. Architecture and urban planning is very interesting to look at, and how this is now developing. There are many, many African architects that are, with a local understanding, with a local context, who understand and operate on the ground, that could also inspire architects and designers across Europe and North America. So I think that journalists across Europe and North America, in news channels, in media houses, and in newspapers, should play a much more focused role also in this matter. Now, what about real estate? A lot of newspapers across the Western world, they have sections on real estate, which normally cover, cities across Europe, such as London, Paris, and Rome, and maybe New York or Los Angeles. Well, that's great. But there are so many real estate opportunities across Africa. So, for example, how could, newspapers or news channels cover real estate opportunities in Africa? Where are the real estate opportunities, currently looking ahead? What are the opportunities? How can, for example, people across Europe or North America buy apartments in Africa? How can Can you buy land? Maybe you can't buy land. Well, how is it possible? And what are the considerations to look at and think about? I mean, there is just so many areas to look at. What about commercial real estate? What about warehousing? What about understanding logistics? How logistics is connected to transportation corridors? How perhaps warehousing now is increasingly important in certain areas. I mean, this is something which is really interesting and I think very important, because if newspapers and news channels across Europe and North America had covered this could inspire many real estate entrepreneurs and real estate investors to also consider Africa. Therefore, consider this a very positive encouragement, but I really hope in the future that when I open, newspapers in the morning from Europe or North America and I read, I will be able to read very intelligent, calibrated, focused, balanced, and really insightful articles about a range of fields from all over Africa. I think that is very important, and this is also very serious, because if Western media houses and news channels and newspapers fail to cover African countries in a more intelligent, nuanced, and balanced and informed manner, then that is going to weaken the opportunity and weaken the chances for people across Europe and North America to gain a deeper insight and understanding for what is going on. Because we must remember that for most people, it is the newspapers and news channels and TV channels that provide most of the news that they get. A lot of people don't travel so much maybe across Africa, although that is something which I think and hope will increase, because after COVID, although that is now going to take time, because vaccination unfortunately has been very, very, very limited across Africa. That is important. I'm going to talk about that in another video. But for this time, I think that newspapers, news channels, and media houses should play a much more active and focused approach and do a lot more to cover African countries and stories from a wide range of fields in Africa. I think that is going to be very important going forward, so that one can increase the understanding, insight, and knowledge for populations across Europe and North America in the future. Well, thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to see you again. And please remember to subscribe to African Horizon. Thank you.